Pacific from Willoughby. And snow went there. And 20 minutes later, it's crazy.
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Denny. Hey,
Hello.
Jen.
Brenda.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi,
Hey,
George.
George.
Gang.
Yeah. Good evening. It is 7 p.m. Welcome to the March 1st, 2021 Council Caucus meeting for Mayfield Village, Ohio. This meeting has been duly noticed and will be held in accordance with Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22, specific to recent amendments made in light of the current COVID-19 declared emergency, House Bill 197, amended by House Bill 404. Under the orders of Governor DeWine and the Director of Health of Ohio, and pursuant to Ordinance 2020-08, adopted March 16th, 2020, Council will be meeting remotely via electronic means. No one will be in council chambers or able to access that space during the meeting. The public is invited to view the meeting live and can access the meeting through a link posted on the Mayfield Village website at www.mayfieldvillage.com. Mayfield Village will conduct these proceedings in compliance with all applicable state laws and regulations. First up, we have pending legislation. Tonight we have two ordinances. The first one is ordinance number 2021-01 entitled an ordinance repealing and replacing Mayfield Village Codified Ordinance Section 521.20 relating to smoking in Mayfield Village. Are there any questions? Ordinance number 2021-01 will move to third read at our March council meeting. Next is ordinance number 2021-02 entitled an ordinance appropriating funds for current expenses and expenditures of Mayfield Village, Ohio for the period of from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021 and declaring an emergency. Are there any questions? Ordinance number 2021-02 will move to third read at our March council meeting. We have one resolution for tonight, resolution number 2021-05 entitled a resolution requesting the Cuyahoga County Fiscal Officer to adjust the amended official certificate of estimated resources for 2021. Are there any questions? Resolution number 2021-05 will be considered at our March council meeting. Next, we have the mayor's report.
Thank you, Council President. I have some comments that I will reserve for later on to open our discussion of pedestrians safely crossing Wilson Mills at Village Trails. For now, I'd just like to remind everyone that we have a very important special election coming up on March 16th, and I would encourage everyone to get informed on the issues. There's a comprehensive article in the recent Voice of the Village, and also please go out and vote either by mail or on March 16th at the Civic Center. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Gardner. Our next council meeting is Monday, March 15th, 2021. This meeting will be held virtually. Next is the administration report. Mr. Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a couple of items coming up that will require action at the 15th regular meeting that I wanted to bring to your attention this evening. First of which is a proposed community reinvestment area agreement between the village and the new owners of the Holiday Inn on Beta Drive. You will all remember roughly a year and a half ago, the state of Ohio approved our application to establish the CRA, which allows the village to offer real estate tax abatement to developers as a financial tool to assist development. I've been working with the hotel for roughly a year on their redevelopment plans. Unfortunately, they decided to undertake these plans at the worst possible moment, given that the COVID-19 crisis has affected the hospitality industry probably harder than anyone, which is sort of why we're having this discussion to assist them in their renovation plans. First and foremost, they've got to correct roughly 30 years of neglect, particularly when it comes to mechanicals and life safety and building efficiency. So they've got to spend quite a bit of money just to sort of get to square one. And then secondly, they want to make the hotel much more appealing to the business traveler once the pandemic is over. And we think the time is right to offer this incentive to them to sort of help bridge that gap and position the hotel for success once the pandemic sort of subsides. So as you'll see in your packets, we've negotiated with them a 10-year agreement for 75% abatement of the approved value. And I think it's important to remember too that under this program, the level of taxes paid to the county and to the schools and to the parks and libraries will never decrease below its current level. So the hotel will continue to pay at least what it's paying now. The abatement is only for the improved value which is roughly $1.1 million of eligible funds. So that equates at 75%, that equates to about a $26,000 savings per year to the hotel over 10 years. We've run this past the Mayfield City Schools several times, had some very good conversations with them. And I'm happy to say that they are supportive of the agreement as currently written. We've got to clean up a few things with the law department before we convene the review committee. But that's essentially where the deal stands. Again, it's 10 years, 75% abatement on roughly $1.1 million of value. And I'm happy to field any questions either tonight or next Monday. Hearing none, Mr. President, should I move on to the next item?
Yes, please.
Thank you. The next item is kind of a routine matter of business for us, and that's the annual review of the income tax rebate incentive program. There's a brief memo in your packets as well. No action obviously needed tonight, but in 2 weeks we'll need to take action on 3 of these. Just briefly, marketresearch.com, formerly known as Fredonia Group, they're wrapping up year 5 of a 5-year agreement. They are not in compliance. They did not meet the minimum income tax generated, so no payment is required there. Wireless Environment, formerly Mr. Beams, they're wrapping up year 4 of 5. They are in compliance. That agreement is a 30% rebate of their income taxes. That amounts to roughly $16,501 that will be paid this year. Preemptive Solutions is finishing up year 2 of 5. That is a 30% rebate in excess of the baseline value. So that payment this year would be $2,605. Mars Electric, you may remember, amended their agreement after year 1 to slide the reporting calendar back 1 month. So we don't have a report on them this month. We'll need to reconvene 1 month later, but by all accounts, they're doing well this year. QED finished up a 5-year agreement. You may remember that one. No annual payments were required, but it was a lump sum payment in year 1. So that agreement is now expired, but it's important to note that they're holding their own during the pandemic. Income taxes were down roughly 10% this year, but they're still doing very well and are one of our most valuable taxpayers. The other agreement that we won't need to take action on, but I just wanted to bring to your attention, was approved last year, and that's Omni Systems relocating into 701 Beta. Their agreement does not commence until January 1st of this year, which means year 1 payment will be due roughly a year from now. But it's important to note that in 2019, their income taxes paid to the village were roughly $26,650. In 2020, they jumped to $133,576, which is obviously about a 400% increase. So we're very proud of the growth that they've had. They're roughly 1.5 years ahead of their growth projections under that agreement. So happy to report that they're doing quite well. And that concludes that brief report. Again, happy to field any questions at this point.
Hey, John, thanks a lot. Are any of these ones that are expiring? Can you do a new one, or are the companies inquiring about doing a new one?
No one has inquired at this point, Councilman. All of the agreements are written with a paragraph that states they're free to come back and ask. So there's nothing that would prohibit them from doing so. In speaking with the mayor and Mr. Nguyen and Mrs. Wolgemuth last month, we thought the sort of the year-end reporting would be a good time to reach out to the companies that are expiring or close to expiring, and have this year's reporting sort of be the entree to that discussion, what their needs are, what their growth needs are, what their levels of staffing are looking like. So the door is going to be opened as we send these annual reviews out into the mail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Marquardt? Thank you, Mr. Marquardt.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Next up is engineering police report. I believe Mayor Bodnar has a presentation she'd like to share.
I do. Thank you, Council President. Well, as you know, we had some residents on Wilson Mills east of Slum reach out to their council representatives inquiring as to whether or not we could put a crosswalk where Village Trails intersects with Wilson Mills. And Council Representatives Jurasek and Murphy brought that to our attention. We thought it was definitely worth revisiting and having that discussion. So we have done that, and we have with us tonight our engineer, Mr. Capello, and our police chief, Chief Matthias, to review with council everything that you're concerned about or that you have questions about. But before we do that, I have a brief presentation where I thought it would be good to give everyone a little bit of historical context and then also present what the options are. And I hope that that will then launch us into a productive discussion as to what to do next. So Jeff, if you go to the next slide, just a little bit of the history of the sidewalk. In about 2001, at the request of some of the residents of Hanover Woods, the village installed a 4-foot wide asphalt walkway on the south side of Wilson Mills, and that ran from Beach Hill to Hanover Road. This was actually an extension of an existing asphalt walkway on the south side that ran from Som Center Road to Beach Hill. That was installed decades earlier. In 2019, then, as part of our Wilson Mills resurfacing project, we upgraded the walkway to a 5-foot concrete sidewalk that ran from Som Center to Hanover Road. And that the cost of that was about $220,000. Next slide, please, Jeff. Thank you. The following year, in 2020, the sidewalk was extended then from Hanover to Echo Drive. So on the south side of Wilson Mills, it ran from Hanover to Village Trail. And on the north side, then, it started at Village Trail and went east to Echo. The cost of that was about $238,000. And at the time we were doing that work, based on the recommendation of our traffic engineers at TMS Engineering, we decided not to put in a crosswalk at Wilson Mills at Village Trail. So they deemed it to be safer not to put that in, and we followed that advice. So next slide, please. Thank you. So the options we have at this point are, we figured about 4 options, and we're willing to consider anything else also. But the first option was just to leave things as is, to make no changes or improvements. And as I said, our engineers had indicated earlier that there is sufficient sight distance in both directions to see vehicles approaching, and they believe the safest way to do this then was not to mark that intersection with a crosswalk. The second option we have is to install a traffic signal and a crosswalk at Wilson Mills and Village Trails. This would, of course, impede traffic somewhat, the traffic flow on Wilson Mills. We would have to do a traffic study before we could install a traffic signal and crosswalk. We believe that the signal or the traffic study would not warrant a signal because we don't believe that it's going to show enough people crossing at that intersection. And we are told that if we put in a cross or a traffic signal where it is not warranted, we could increase the village's liability. Now, keep in mind that part of the reason a traffic study may not show enough pedestrian traffic to justify a traffic light is because people may not be crossing that intersection or allowing their children to cross because they don't believe it's safe. So that could be part of the reason why there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic crossing at that intersection. So the third option then we looked at was we could install a crosswalk with pedestrian crossing signs. We don't have any data or information which would show that a marked crosswalk would increase pedestrian safety. In fact, there is serious concern that it could create an additional safety hazard because pedestrians might have a sense of security then that they could cross whenever the sign said they could, and that vehicles will automatically stop at that crosswalk, and that may not be the case. Again, the flashing lights at the crosswalk are not recommended by our traffic engineers. And again, a traffic study would need to be done to justify that installation. The fourth option we looked at would be, we could extend the sidewalk on the north side of Wilson Mills to Som Center Road. So that would go from Village Trails where it ends now and go all the way west to Som Center Road. That would then enable people on the north side and the south side to be able to walk to town center without needing to cross Wilson Mills Road somewhere east of Som. There will be still instances where residents want to cross Wilson Mills east of Som. People may have friends, or their children may have friends that live on the other side of Wilson Mills, so they still may want to cross at a different point. So the cost that Mr. Capello has given us as an estimate to extend the sidewalk on the north side would be about $700,000. It's a pretty pricey project. Part of the reason that it would cost a little bit more than other sidewalks is it's going to disrupt some trees and plantings, and it's going to require more significant grading, and that would increase the cost of installation. So thank you, Council President. I'll turn the floor over to you. And again, I remind everybody that Mr. Capello and Chief Matthias are here with us to address your concerns, answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Budnar. We'll open up the floor to any questions.
I do.
Chief. Oh, go ahead, Al.
Back when this project was developing, all these issues came up, and one of the biggest issues was crossing Wilson Mills. When they did the traffic study, they assured everyone that because that was the center of the straightest part of Wilson Mills Road, that it would be the safest. And at that time, they said we would not have to put a crosswalk and it wouldn't be a big issue. So now, a couple of years later, you know, people are starting to use it and they're starting to realize this isn't going to be a problem. So, you know, like I say, I don't know the solution, but I mean, this all came up in the beginning, even before Chief Matthias was here. So it's one of them things, you know, we're going to have to work through together. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Myers.
Chief, I know you mentioned before when I was questioning it, the concern, and Mayor mentioned it as well, is the false sense of security pedestrians would have with a crosswalk there. Obviously, putting a crosswalk with signs there, you know, is an easier fix than the option 4 of investing $700,000 in installing sidewalks. Is it something that obviously there's not a lot of traffic or pedestrian traffic now with it being winter, but as spring and summer, is it something that we can monitor? You know, the sidewalks are fairly new. Is it something that we can monitor there? Like you had said that you would do, to see if there's an increase in flow, and maybe revisit the crosswalk, leave it as it is and revisit the crosswalk in a few months?
Well, I'll start off the answer and then I'll throw it over to Tom if he has any input. If we're going to seriously consider putting in a marked crosswalk, we would have to do a engineering study. And that engineering study would include observing pedestrian traffic, because we already know what the vehicle traffic is. And we already know the dynamics of that, the roadway and the crosswalk, or the area where the crosswalk would go. So the question would be the amount of pedestrian traffic. And so that's what the traffic survey would provide.
So a pedestrian survey would have to be done if it's just a crosswalk and not a signal. I don't necessarily think the traffic signal may be a good idea right there on Wilson Mills, because I agree with Mayor Bodnar that it would interrupt the flow of traffic. But a pedestrian survey would have to be done regardless of if it's a traffic signal crosswalk or just a crosswalk with some signage.
Yes, all the information we have so far shows, like in the study we did before the sidewalk was put in, shows that it's not a place where you need to install a crosswalk. So
Okay,
with all the data we have, it's no crosswalk, no
Okay.
marked walk, I should say.
okay,
And
And-
Councilman Jurek, what we're told also is if we do the study and it does not justify anything added in the way of a crosswalk or anything like that, and we go ahead and put one in anyway, that we're doing that at our own risk. Mr. Coyne, maybe you could jump in and give us a little legal perspective on that.
Sure. Basically, when you put in traffic signalization, you need to get a warrant. So it's a traffic study that's undertaken, and it's done using the ITE manual and objective traffic criteria. If it concludes that you don't need to put in a traffic signalization or crosswalk in that area, one, the state won't help pay for it, but that's not the issue here necessarily anyway. But that if there would ever be a future accident, the village could have liability should that occur, because it could be perceived to be impeding the safe flow of traffic. So
okay,
you usually put in traffic signalization, crosswalks, traffic devices, unless you have a warrant and you've got a credible traffic engineer that's advising you to do that. Now, that liability, I will say, is typically fairly remote, because most accidents are still caused by driver error. But if it had to do with impeding the flow of traffic, too close to another signalized intersection, you could have problems. And so that would be the risk that the village would have.
okay, thank you. And
Yeah.
then,
Just to kind of summarize what I was saying earlier, just what I want everybody to understand is that based off all the engineering data and all the research we've done on this, putting a marked crosswalk there won't make pedestrian crossing any safer. If I thought I would, I'd be the first one advocating for it. I'm not saying it's going to make it less safe, even though I am concerned that with the false sense of security and knowing how, at times motorists don't follow all the traffic laws, that there could be a false sense of security, people crossing, thinking if I'm in the crosswalk, I'm safer. That's kind of speculation. But what we can say is there's no data for this type of roadway and where the crosswalk would be to say, if we put a marked crosswalk there, it's going to make things safer. I think that's the important thing to understand.
sure, thank you, I appreciate it. And that, not only talking about that piece of Wilson Mills from Village Trails to Echo, but sort of leading into option 4 with the sidewalks on the north end sort of addresses pedestrians crossing at any point in Wilson Mills. You see residents crossing Wilson Mills from any of those side streets over there. With the sidewalks running on the north end, I agree that's a significant sum of money. And the houses on that side seem to be closer to Wilson Mills than they are on the south side. So it has at any point in time, I'm assuming some of the sidewalk research was done before. Have we questioned or surveyed the residents at all on the north side of Wilson Mills?
Mr. Capello?
I know there was a survey done when we were doing the sidewalk to the east. I'm not sure the sample group, if everyone on Wilson Mills was asked. Diane Wagamuth might have a better idea on that.
Okay,
Just so you know, the cost, what I had to do is the cost for the north side sidewalk is a proportion of what the section we just finished from Hanover to Village or to Echo. And there may not be all the, I had to put curb and new structures, drainage structures, and I might not have to do that as much on the north, but I didn't want to give you a price that it comes in way over. So, the range could be, less than the 700,000, obviously, but again, that gives you a good idea of what we're talking about. And again, I can't remember, Brenda, do you recall about the survey?
No, but I was going to ask you, and I can't recall this, is whether, I know we had looked at it. Were those sidewalks we were looking at possibly putting in on the north side, were they in the right of way for the most part?
Um, When,
That's, you know,
the most of it, what I would try to do, in that case, the power poles are in this position that would allow us to keep most of this walk in the right of way. Some issues are some of the yards have very sloped front lawns areas that are higher. So I'd have to cut the grade down and then grade back into their yard. Again, that's not undoable. We had easements on the other project. We would have to maybe get in a few locations, some easements and grading easements and things like that. But a lot of the issue too is there's a lot of people who have a bunch of vegetation along there. They like it for screening, but it's in the right of way, so it could be removed. It's not like it can't be removed.
Okay. Is it something that, if obviously this is a bigger project, like I mentioned, than the crosswalk, if something serious that other council members or the residents voice that they are looking to want, can we send a survey to the residents in the area? Is that something that we do?
to see, yeah, we could do that. So you're looking at two things, asking the people in the area whether they would want the sidewalk on the north side, and also surveying the residents on the north side to see what their feelings are about putting in a new sidewalk in front of their homes.
Correct, because
We could do that.
I'm just curious, because I know, Mr. Capello, I know what you're mentioning, that, you know, there is a lot of vegetation and it would take away from some of the front yardage over there. So I'm just concerned to see what they think of it.
Mrs. Jurasik, you did hear from some residents who asked for the crosswalk, right?
I did hear about the crosswalk from Village Trails to Echo. I did hear from a few just concerned residents as if there should be, and if it was ever looked into. I had gone with them after the chief and I had spoke. And again, you know, they seemed to understand and were okay. And again, it was winter time, so there wasn't a lot of pedestrian traffic and the sidewalks are fairly new over there. So,
so you have had some interest in people wanting to make it safer.
Correct.
So that they could cross. And Councilman Murphy, you've had that too also, right?
Yeah, I've had a couple conversations. I've had it on both sides of the coin. I've talked to people that said there's enough sight line that I feel safe enough. And then there's some people that, you know, say I see cars whipping around there and I don't feel safe at all. Jen, I don't mean to cut you off, but I had a couple questions too when you're done.
Sure, I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Capello and Chief.
That option 2 for the signal, that's a signal like the signal on Ridgeberry right by the high school, right? Where it only turns red if it's actuated by a person, correct? I mean, we're not going to red when no one's there to cross, right?
No, that would have to be a regular traffic light because there's an intersection there. The one on Ridgeberry is just a crossing. And since there's not a side street or another roadway attached to it, we're able to make it the flashing light only activated when the button's pushed. If we put it there, it would have to be a regular traffic light.
So what would we have to do to make it a signal that's only activated by a person? Do we have to move the crossing one way or the other? And is that worth looking into?
And you know, if Tom wants to jump in on this, but we had a meeting with the traffic engineer about that because I had looked into if we could have the flashing signals pedestrian activated. And for those, we can't just put them there. We have to get approval to put them there. And so we'd have to have the engineering survey. And again, the engineering survey would probably say that we can't put a flashing light there.
There wouldn't be a justifiable amount of, well, currently, at the current standards, the amount of pedestrians crossing would not justify it.
Right.
Okay, so not at the current location of where the crosswalk is, but if we move the crosswalk one way or the other, I don't know, I'm just throwing out an idea. I don't think we need a signal there to stop the people from, Village Trails coming up to sit at a red light every time. But, one of those pedestrian activated signals that they can punch and it hits a red light and stop traffic, I think might be a decent idea.
That would, again, have to probably be moved either west or east, so it's not near the intersection, like Chief Matthias was saying. The other thing, though, is, again, according to the traffic engineer, he was saying that those usually, they have to have, they have to be justified by volume of traffic or a certain design feature or shortened sight distance, which we don't have here right now.
Yeah.
And the other thing that concerns me is that when we decided, where to jog the crosswalks, we put it at that place because the engineers had told us that there's sufficient sight distance on either side to see the vehicles approaching, and that was why that location was chosen. So if we moved it east or west, I'm concerned that we would not have the same amount of sight distance on either side, and that would be a safety factor there.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose sight on, we're hearing that people aren't safe, but, oh, don't worry, our engineers say it's safe, so you're safe, so.
No, Mr. Myers, we're not saying it's safe. That's what we're saying, is that there's nothing to justify putting the signal there based on all the engineering data. And what I'm saying is, and then the information that the research we've done is, it's not saying it'll make it any more safe or necessarily any less safe. Just on a roadway with the traffic volume and pedestrian volume, it's pretty much, it doesn't affect it either way. And so we're not trying to say it's safe. We're trying to say the putting the crosswalk won't change the safety factor at all.
Correct.
I think if you do a survey, Mayor, you must include Kenwood and Robley, because those are the high traffic walkers, and we have a lot of young children now. In fact, tonight when I went out, we had some bike riders because the weather sort of changed and everybody wants to get out. It'd be interesting because I've had people that live on Robley complain that they like to walk up to Oakwood and cross and go to Beechwood and go into that area. They have their way of walking, and they walk every day. They walk down. Usually their course seems to be Wilson Mills to Somme, down Thornapple, and then back into Kenwood. So I think maybe, I don't know, Chief, have you ever ascertained, I don't know how you could do it, how many walkers we have? I've allowed dog walkers and whatever on High Street all the time. So, and I think what would happen if we put a crosswalk at Echo, then people on Robley, people on Kenwood, and people on Oakwood are going to demand the same thing. I think we have to be very cautious about that. What I do hear is the speed, and Chief, I don't know how you can control that. Just by being there day and night, you can't do that. I mean, that's not fair to your force. They have other jobs to do. But used to be that they would put a cruiser down on Beach Hill, and that sort of slowed people down, especially on the high traffic times. I don't know what the solution is. We got to keep those people out of Geauga County coming into Cuyahoga County, I guess. I don't know how you do that. But I think we must be aware of that whole quadrant that is on the north side of Wilson Mills, if you do a survey.
Yeah,
Thank
and Mrs. Mills, just to answer your question about that, I did a traffic survey using our stealth speed box in 2019, and then another one in 2021. And just so everybody knows, the pre-COVID traffic volume, daily traffic volume for Wilson Mills in that area is about 8,000 cars per day. Currently, it's about 5,000. And when we talk about the traffic studies, they normally look at vehicle volume as, between 9,000 and 12,000 daily volume before they start, really seriously considering things like marked crosswalks and things. When I did the 2 traffic surveys, the speeds weren't terribly bad. The average speeds were usually, I'd have to look at the data, usually around 39 or 40 miles an hour. Yeah, we do have the high flyers, but again, they're few and far between. And our officers have been doing traffic details. I know in February we wrote, because it's like almost the end of February, I think we've written 6 or 8 traffic citations, doing traffic details on like in the Village Circle area. So we're there. We're doing traffic enforcement there. And again, the traffic surveys I do are 2 weeks long each. So they give a pretty good sample. And again, I can share that data. But the majority of drivers are going within, reasonable speeds for that area.
It seems like the speed is always going east into Geauga County. It isn't so much when they're coming into Mayfield Village for
Right.
some reason. And I don't know why that would be.
And the traffic surveys we did showed the majority of the higher speeds are the westbound vehicles, which I was surprised at myself. I had assumed it was always eastbound because you're going downhill, but it is the westbound traffic.
Well, as long as we take in consideration of all the people in that area, I think we'll be safe to prove our point why we can or cannot do. But our primary thing is always safety of our citizens. So we just have to be aware of what's going on.
So I will work with Ms. Wolgamuth. We'll take a look at the old survey that we did. I don't recall asking about putting a sidewalk on the north side, but we can go back and we'll take a look at that and figure it out. And certainly we can do more inquiries of the residents to see what they want, and the people who live along the north side who would have the sidewalk if we decided to put one in. So we'll do a little bit more legwork on that, and we'll get back to everybody on that.
Well, with a new sidewalk on the north side, we'd have to consider a 5-foot one because of the snow plowing. So there's a lot that goes into it that the normal resident doesn't understand. Engineering and police control and snow control, and that's the things that they want. So,
I mean, before we go down the path of putting a sidewalk on the north side and asking residents, which I don't know, sounds extreme to me. Do we take a sample of the Echo, the Village Trails, the Hanover, the Kenwoods, near Patsy, and ask, have you crossed that street and do you feel safe crossing it? And I don't know, is that worth it rather than just going straight to, oh, let's ask about a crosswalk on the north side? I don't know. We don't want to be sending out surveys every other week. I understand that.
I think the hardest part to put the sidewalk in would probably be between Kenwood and Oakwood, because those houses are really close to the street. The rest of the area, even from Echo on up to Sam, seems like would be enough land to put a sidewalk in without too much trouble. There are some tough spots in the middle of the block from Oakwood to Sam, but they're far and few between, I think, so.
I mean,
The sidewalk is expensive. So.
Jen and I have only heard from a small population of the people living, around us.
Right, and that is concerning the residents just crossing at that area from Village Trails to Echo. I think the sidewalk survey would lead into a bigger discussion of residents crossing Wilson Mills at all of those different points, sort of like what Mr. Mills was getting into. So yeah, I think it's bigger discussion, not just crossing at that point and at that certain intersection.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. Once we put even some hash marks in the street, there are people that live on Robley and Kenwood and Oakwood, they're going to want the same thing. And they're going to think they're safe, right, Chief? Because they're in that crosswalk and the law says. But that doesn't mean that people are going to obey the law.
So I think before we take any action, I think we have to continue this discussion. So I would recommend that I work with Chief Matthias and Mr. Capello, Mrs. Wolgamuth, and we look at all the different options again, and maybe we put together an outline and we give that outline back to council, and then we can work off that to judge what future action. So we wouldn't be sending out any surveys to anybody at this point. We would try to maybe focus our discussion on what we, what the best alternative would be, and maybe what the least intrusive alternative would be, and whether that can be safe or not. So I think I'll go back to the table. I'll work on an outline. I'll get the input of Chief Matthias, Mr. Capello, and I'll work with Mrs. Molgamuth, and we'll put together something then to give to council for our next round of discussions.
And I got a fifth option, a bridge right over Wilson Mills.
That's been suggested to me, as well as an underpass, but I don't know. Well,
So I guess one other option too, then, would we potentially want to maybe put some street signs up? Like, I'm not exactly sure where we have the speed limit signs are right over there. I'd have to drive through there again. But can we put like, maybe those smaller signs underneath that say like strictly enforced and things of that nature, which are kind of drawing attention to people driving through there saying, hey, slow down. I don't know if that something like that would help, Chief. Do you feel that those types of signs help, like strictly enforced and things of that nature with the speed?
No, to give you the easy answer. No, people don't pay attention to signs.
Okay, I was just curious because I have seen some of those here and there.
Yeah, we have them. We have, like, I know we have a strictly enforced going eastbound, but again, I don't think the signage will make any difference. Because like I said, if our goal is to get everyone driving 35 miles an hour on Wilson Mills, it's never going to happen. And again, the speeds that I've gotten in my surveys, my speed studies, do not show any, overly, ridiculous speeds happening on a regular basis. It's the few and far between. And so, we're targeting the times of high volume, trying to show a presence there. And we'll continue to do that throughout the spring and summer. It's going to be one of our permanent spots, but again, there's nothing I can do to add the sense of security, somebody crossing a roadway like that. It's really comes down to volume. If you're going to cross between, 7 and 9 in the morning, you're going to encounter a lot more cars than if you go to cross between, 10 and 11 a.m. or, 2 and 3 p.m. So it all comes down to volume.
if I can ask Mrs. Jurcek and Mr. Murphy, the people that talked to you about it, were they concerned for their own safety or for the safety of their children in crossing Wilson Mills?
The individuals that I talked to were concerned for their own safety, who have crossed over there before and have encountered and seen traffic.
Same.
Same.
All right, any other comments, discussion? Okay, thank you everybody for your commentary. That was a great discussion. As Mayor Budner mentioned, we'll get some more information and kind of regroup at a later date. Moving along, we have the Finance Department report, Mr. Nguyen.
I just wanted to mention for the 2021 budget, I provided everyone with an update last week of some minor adjustments that were made since you received a detailed copy. I don't anticipate any changes between now and the council meeting for the final approval. So, but if there are any questions on the budget, I'm always happy to entertain them, tonight or between now and the council meeting.
No questions for Mr. Nguyen. We'll continue on. Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Next is Law Department report, Mr. Coyne.
No report, Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Coyne. Next is the Service Department. We have Mr. Nguyen on behalf of the Service Department.
Yeah, this is our annual fertilization program for the village properties. The service director went out and got competitive pricing from several companies that we dealt with in the past, and True Green Commercial came in with the lowest price of $12,339.98. So we'll be asking for approval for that at the March council meeting, so we could plan for the spring fertilization program.
Any questions for Mr. Nguyen? Thank you, Mr. Nguyen. Are there any other matters that come before council tonight? Since there are no other comments, we are adjourned. It is 7:46 p.m.